Welcome, everybody, to episode 5 of the Cosmic Joke podcast with Victoria and Randall. I'm
Hi.
Randall. This is Victoria.
Hi.
How are you, Victoria?
Good. I'm doing awesome. It's another beautiful week. I'm excited to be here.
Right? Yeah, it's always fun to sit down with this little bit of time every week with you and just rant about some beautiful, fun things that are fun to discuss and philosophize or, share. And I don't know. It's always something I always learn from our talks, and it's always good to evolve, right? So anyway, it's fun to bring people into it, and hopefully they'll hear something they'll resonate with.
Absolutely.
So we were chatting a little bit before this, and we were talking about life and the cycle of life and the cycle of everything, and what goes around comes around, ends up kind of being what we decided was our topic for the week. So, why don't you get started on, tell us why that topic resonated with you. I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, so this topic, so like both of us had interesting experiences today. So for myself, just doing like some simple home renovations, getting ready for the summertime, and air conditioner went out, so I took out the old one, started putting in the new one, and I asked one of my neighbors to come help me put it in. So we took the old one out and we started putting this new one in. And long story short, me and this neighbor used to renovate and flip houses together. And so she went to go pick up this air conditioner, and she was like, "Oh, I'm not as strong as I used to be," and she was really struggling to pick this thing up. And I'm like, "Oh, it's not that heavy. It's maybe 75 pounds," and I pick it up no problem, and and go and toss it into the window. And I was just like, "Oh man, it kind of hit my heart for a second." I was like, oh shoot, like when I had met her, she was in her early 40s, and now she's in her 60s. And it kind of hit me that I'm like, oh, we're getting older. And that's kind of what brought this conversation up, where I think of back to when my parents, they had died earlier in when I was like early in my 20s. And when I took care of them until they died. And it's just this whole idea of like, I always looked at my parents of like somebody that, they would take care of me forever. And then, when they were nearing their end of their life, I had to start taking care of them. And then when I was working with my neighbor, I'm like, oh, I had to start taking care of my neighbor. And it's like this weird cycle of like, okay, what comes around goes around. And that's what brought up our conversation. So.
Right. And I guess to kind of tie it with a state of, also kind of our sober life to a point, right? It's like in sober life, we're always supposed to live a life of service, and I'll tell you, when I was in alcoholism or addiction, man, I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone anyone else. So, I was never even put in positions to be there for anyone else, right? I wasn't capable. I wasn't capable of being there for myself. And I find more often than not, whether I like it or not, I'm forced to be in a life of service. It's just how it works now. Whether I want it or not, and it's humbling that there's so many layers and levels to this, like everything, right? But for me, it's I've been back in my mom's, helping her with some things, and she's getting older, and it's very similar situations, right? It's interesting to watch. It's I feel in the giant pattern of life, and the giant what goes around comes around. We're born, we're in diapers, we grow out of diapers, and we start to mature, physically, mentally, spiritually, hopefully, and somewhere in there we must kind of peak, and then we start to regress back to what we came in as, right? And whether you end up in diapers again or whether you end up just mentally like a child, I've definitely noticed many aging people in my world, and maybe it's not all of them, but from what I've seen, a lot of them mentally start to become childlike again, very, very childlike. And it's an interesting process to watch, and then to be, patient enough to remember that, and to realize that the roles flip sometimes, and then the child has to become the parent. The child that was the child is now the parent of the parent, if that makes any sort of sense.
Oh, it just like, I don't know, it touches like this like little soft spot in my heart, and it just brings up that sense of fragility, I guess, that comes with life, and it makes me appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah, right. No, absolutely. It's an interesting journey for sure. It's very humbling, and I imagine I could be on. I mean, imagine I can only imagine as I'm watching this being on that end when I'm, elderly or older, and I start to digress to a point, right? And I start to need help or patience, or well, I mean, inside the pride and the ego are honestly having a really hard time with that. I would imagine that they're very, it's got to be hard on them personally, right? Because inside there's always that eternal internal voice, right? That what we truly are, that really is infinite and eternal, and it never ages. I mean, whatever you want to call it, our intuition, our consciousness, but our true state of who we really are is always the same. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's something in me that's never aged. It's the same spot of me that's been the same spot of me that's always been there, and it's never older. And it's like my awareness of Randy, that awareness, that consciousness of Randy, and it's always watching Randy and paying attention to him and seeing what he's doing. And I can imagine a certain spot when Randy starts to, or Randall, whatever I am today, starts to age and do these things. That same self's going to be watching it, going, "Oh, poor guy, here he goes, how's he going to handle this one?" And it's got to be, living that out. It's honestly, it's got to be pretty interesting, especially when you start like losing your memory or things like that. And or you're, like you said, the inability to be as physical, which truthfully, I mean, I'm, slowly but surely, things aren't, I'm not an athlete, snowboarder, like I used to be. I definitely have, my body has aches and pains for all those. So it's, not bad. I don't have them very bad at all, but there's the little things within me that, hurt, or, maybe I can't be as physical as long, and it's humbling to age, for sure.
Mhm. I mean, it makes sense to me now. Well, I guess I can understand why my grandfather would, be on the roof trying to fix things, and then he would fall off and break his back. I guess there's just this kind of deep-seated need to be needed.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then, to get into the deeper, what comes around goes around. What's been more humbling too is I remember growing up being, I'm not going to be my parents, and when I was drinking and using, I actually really believe I did a great job at not being my parents in that state, right? And then I got sober and I had to start rebuilding myself. And the cosmic joke of the universe is like, "Look, sucker, you're not getting out of this life that easy. I'm not gonna, you know, basically what I'm trying to say is, when I got sober, I realized I did becoming the parts of my mom and dad that I said I'd never become. And I'm like, man, geez, and that's tough, because some of it, I do think it's transcendable, and but I think I cheated the process, by numbing myself with the drugs and alcohol, to not truly live the experience, to truly alchemize what I wanted to alchemize, or transcend certain aspects that I saw in them, which was really showing me, right?
Mm,
Um, it's all the same thing. It appears as a family, but it's really not, right? And so the things that I was being shown in them, which were obviously inside of me, I wasn't getting off of this experience without facing them in a sober state, is what I'm trying. And so the bigger what goes around comes around. This is a little wild, right? The cosmic joke, once again, is like, hey, no, you're not getting off of this rock without doing the work from a sober state, and then having to address these things that I thought, which I really did, the drugs and alcohol. There's a lot of them that I absolutely transcended, because it made me comfortable in my skin. It allowed me to not made me, the liquid courage, not facing fear. The fears weren't there when I was in that state. Then to get sober and realize all those fears I saw, and my dad in particular, which was showing me my core truth. Now I'm like, wow, I got to face these things from a sober state. So there's some really big what goes around comes around as well. I think it's the nature of this experience, is it's all, and give and you shall receive, right? It's all the flow of life, and then when you listen to it all, it's all saying the same thing. What goes around comes around, give and you shall receive, you know, any of those things, right? It's an interesting process.
mm. So I guess, do you believe that we inherit, I guess, these types of cycles from our parents, and then once we solve them, we stop seeing those cycles within our parents? Yeah, it's just out of curiosity.
Well, me, I'm going to take it to the level of how I see it, and which is, I don't really see. Yeah, it appears as a family unit. It appears as mom, dad, Randall, Jeremy, Kaya, his kids, but in reality, it's all the same thing. but kind of showing a different, aspect of the mirror, right? And so I mean, we are them. I mean, to speak in the human language, if we look at like epigenetics, which is produced, basically says our DNA is, stimulated through vibration, and we're products of our environment, then, of course we're our environment. We're extensions of literally what, created us on this planet, but it's really all the same thing that experiences generations, right? And so I do notice this, yes, as I have faced the shadows or faced the dark and I've transcended them, I then get a reflection of where I'm at on the path. So it's all the same thing happening simultaneously. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you this though, I could also tell you that the interesting part is, my even my kids in their own right, it's like my kids were younger humans, but they're like older souls. It's like, I remember when they were born and I'm looking at them processing things and I'm like, man, that took me 30 years to figure out. And they were like, or maybe at the time, maybe even only 25 years, because I had it when I was like 25, but things that took me a long time to put together that when they were born, they were already doing. And I'm like, well, that's really strange. They didn't have to learn it. And it's the common, breaking the cycles, breaking the chains, right? Breaking the generational traumas or curses, right? And as each, person in a, family does it, yes, it permeates both all ways. I've heard, and through some deep teachers of mine, that it heals in eight generations, 4 forward, 4 back. You know what I mean? Like, that's how big a healing, when you go deep into the generational traumas and you really do deep shadow work and go deep within yourself, that it actually heals in 8 generations, which I think is even more powerful than that. Personally, I think it's a lot bigger. But so I do think, whether they're passed already, it heals that. Whether they're not even born yet, it heals that as well. So it's very powerful to realize what we really are, and what we're really doing this for, because it really isn't for us individually. Almost, I mean, it is, but it isn't. I mean, this is the paradox and the oxymoron of human words, because none of them really make sense to how it really works.
Yeah, because I always notice, yeah, whenever something, like, I guess, difficult is happening in my life, as soon as I just let go of it, I recognize that it's always for somebody else that seems to be around me. It has nothing to do with me 100%.
Right. Have you noticed that? I could tell you, it's not even family. It's anybody in my awareness. I'll realize, like when I originally quit drinking, people in my awareness just quit drinking, and not all of them went into a program, or they're just like, I decided to stop.
Mhm.
And every time I'll like I quit coffee and caffeine, right? And then all of a sudden, many people around me stop drinking caffeine. And it's be the change you want to see in the world, right? The world's literally showing you. And when you know this, you see it clearer and clearer. So the more you see it, the more you know it. I mean, the universe is mental, it's all mind. So the more I know, the more my world shows me what I know, which I think is just awareness, right? So anyways, and that's what really sobriety's given me, is the awareness of that oneness, right? So it's amazing what this work really does on how many there's probably, I believe in the quantum field, right? And quantum particles that we'll never even know, that are all affected by things that some of us do, right? I think it's in the whole field. I think everything everybody does is what everything everybody does, right? So as you realize that, and you're like, ooh, I got to be very careful with every decision and choice that I have.
Mhm.
And everything I'm doing, it's really for a way bigger picture than just me, and it's very humbling, and it's very let's just say I personally try to be very careful with anything I do.
Mm. So where do you decide to go from there? What's kind of the purpose of it all? Can it be like whatever you want it to be? Or what do you decide that you want it to be?
What do you mean by that? To go from where? When you say go from there?
Yeah. And so like I guess if the world's your oyster, what do you choose to do with it? Do you feel like there's any purpose, or is it just a giant sandbox that you can just do whatever you want with?
God, I mean, now I don't know how deep you want to get into this philosophical
Yeah,
weirdness of
why
reality today. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I do believe that really what it's about in the big picture is is realizing that this whole thing is truly a very selfish plan. It is about self. It's about myself aligning with my higher self, which takes a lot of work. And as long as I do that, it permeates everything around me. So how the best way to be of service? Well, to do your inner work and realize the more you're doing your inner work and facing your darker shadows, the more it permeates through honestly the whole planet, right? Like literally. And what's the purpose of that? I don't know. Truthfully, is that just a program that's been placed here to give us something because mind wants to feel like it has a purpose and something to do because it makes it feel better, or is that an illusion as well? You know what I mean? Inertly, does anything even matter at all? I don't know, honestly. I mean, I'd like to think, love and kindness and all these things matter, but I've seen a lot of people on this plane that are complete narcissistic sociopaths that don't get a guilty conscience, and they tend to do amazingly well in this system, honestly, too, so I don't know the exact answers of, what's the purpose, what's the thing. I do believe getting to, a state, at one point, I think the end goal is just compassion and empathy, and understanding. And that's the spot to reside as much as possible, but it takes a while to get there. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. What is the purpose on this planet? What is I mean, obviously, a lot of people would say, oh, to raise my vibration and to break free of the illusion of the mind that keeps me in a cage, low vibrational, mindset that creates a narrative within myself, which then reflects back to me, which keeps me in the illusion of separation and nothing's ever working out and it's all going wrong, or, to really become free to realize, no, it's, I have to break free of really fear. I think no, I like talking because it comes out. I think honestly now that I'm coming, I think breaking free of fear is really all that this planet's about. Breaking free of fear. I think fear is our biggest virus, the ego, the illusion of separation, the fear that humans have of so many things, which I do too. I'm not perfect. I still absolutely am facing them. And the deeper I go on my journey, it always seems to be about just facing fears and realizing every time I do, they're not real. You know what I mean? Why am I even scared of them? And that's the part that's interesting. Why? I shouldn't be, but I am. And it's a deeper layer that's in that universal consciousness, or that vibration that permeates all the souls on this planet that makes us human. That I think the goal is to transcend fear and to really, at the end of the day, realize that it's not even real. It really isn't. But my human, like we've talked about this, my human thinks they're real, definitely. And then I don't know why I get scared to do stupid things, because every time I walk into them, it works out of magic. It works out amazingly, right?
So do you think everyone is capable of feeling fear? Because what about the like narcissistic sociopaths that you talked about? Like, do you think that they go around still having some sort of fear as their driver and like of succeeding, I guess?
um, I would imagine that, if we're going to go off of some of the ancient teachings that, there's awareness, or God, if you want to say the word God created us to experience itself, and everything's happening simultaneously, then, right, there must be other versions that don't have fear at all. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, I would imagine that there's got to be some people, that have zero fear. But then again, or are they just so brave and courageous because they actually have such a deep fear that they do? This is the conundrum, right? Like I find that a lot of people do things out of the sake of having a mask of it, and they actually do the opposite to really, I don't know if that makes any sense. It's such an interesting thing, but I've witnessed it. It's like, let's say this: I used to grow a lot of cannabis when it was very illegal, and we used to do a lot of very illegal things. And most people be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you break the law." And I'm like, "Well, this is the only way I can live." It wasn't scary to me, but yet
Mm.
I was scared. I was so scared of dealing with so many people in the real world, or being in a construct, or being in a box like most of the planet, that I would rather go break the law. Although I do believe it was for the right purpose, at the time, to create plant medicine and bring plants and healthier alternatives than alcohol possibly, and things. But the point is I didn't have fear of that at all, but I had fear. And this is why it's so strange, because most people would see that as backwards.
Yeah.
they'd be like, well, you're willing to do that. You don't have fear of that, where most of us do. That's why I was an outcast in that, right? Like, but I had fear of doing what most people are doing every day in a lot of ways, just being part of a construct that was weird to me, so we created our own in the cannabis community. And, but then again, I don't know. It's interesting, the mind, right? Or I used to go snowboard and go dirt bike riding. And I mean, I wasn't ridiculously crazy, but I'd still do things a lot of people never would. It wasn't fear, it was adrenaline. It felt good. You know what I mean? But yet I had fears of just sometimes facing other humans because I was really nervous about other people, right? Like, it's super weird, right? Like, I think we all have different program, right, of what fear is. I mean, I've never really had a fear of spiders or thing, or being broken. I have a lot of fears where I don't worry about anything. Like, if it's not happening right now, I don't worry about it in a lot of ways of like being, you know what I mean? But yeah, but I think you're right. I think there's some people that don't have any fear, that for some reason they must be hardwired to not fear. Maybe, I would imagine that has to be true.
So then do you think that they have something that, like, replaces that? Because, like, it sound like, for me, that kind of makes me think that, uh, the fear almost balances out that drive for compassion or empathy, whereas what would they have? Do they just have nothing? Like, I don't know.
No,
It's something to
yeah,
think about, like, I'm just curious about it, like, what you think.
yeah. No, honestly, I don't even. Like I said, I think the easy answer is that if God or the Creator created everybody to come experience itself, and every experience is happening simultaneously, then that's all happening, and that's all aspects of the one big self here experiencing itself. And I can only speak for mine, and what I've observed in my life of certain people, but I mean, I don't know, look at some of these action sports people, and like, to me, it blows my mind what some of these like BMX riders or even these motocross riders are doing, like triple backflips now and stuff. And or even I was watching a program on my flight over the last few days called the 100-foot wave. And I used to go to the beach all the time and paddle out, and I love the waves. I love the ocean, but these guys are taking it to a whole nother level. And, and they say they're scared and they're fearful, but but the interesting part of this whole movie, I watched a bunch of episodes. They kept talking about being present and being in the now. And they all were talking, and and when you listen and when you watch so many episodes, you realize it's a very spiritual show, right? And you're listening and you're like, all the little truths are coming out. And it's like, no, you got to be present. You got to be in the now. You got to, just be. And, at the end of the day, they're doing it. So do they still have fear? They say they do, but I'll tell you, I don't know. I think I think if you get into too much fear in these experiences, or if you do get scared, then you don't make it. I really believe that if they're really that scared, they wouldn't be making some of these waves, or these guys on dirt bikes, if they were scared to do a triple backflip or something. Like, if you're scared, you're not making it. Like, you got to be all in. I think you really got to be completely all in, completely present, and completely conquer your fear, but then those people might probably have fears of other, I don't, I'm guessing that everybody's got to have some type of fear, I would think. I don't see how you could escape it completely, but
Interesting. So then, why do you think we have some kind of drive to always be more compassionate, more loving, more, and like, why do we feel a sense of disappointment, I guess, when we don't reach these kind of goals that we feel like we want?
that's a two-stage question. No, well, I think honestly, at the end of the day, doesn't it feel better? There's something about being compassionate and understanding that keeps me in a good state. It's a peaceful state. It's not agitated. It's more just, it's a giving state, right? If I'm being compassionate, and, I'm giving, and when I'm being able to be there for others, and then there's something about that feels better, right? It's hardwired into us, I think. I think in the natural flow of energy in the system, it's just it's a natural part of this organic life that appears as reality. That it's just how it works, and we are extensions of that, right? And we happen to feel these things, so we're the ones that are given the emotions or the feelings, and for some reason that's wired into us to, but maybe it's not for everybody. I've seen people that love to take from people and get off on it. You know
Mm.
what I mean? I've seen narcissists that love to, I had someone in my life who was a very big part of my life for a while that told me I'm the best at getting the most out of people for the least. And I watched what he did, and he did it really well. And he loved manipulating it. He loved being the best at getting the most out of people for the least. And and he enjoyed it. And you could see that,
Mm.
so, I don't, like I said, I think we can only speak from our perspective, but I've seen other people's that have, that, and polarity, right? And like the more the light, the more the dark, they're really the same thing. Everything really is the same thing. It's just reflections of the yin and the yang, and
Mhm.
everything needs to happen for this planet to be here. It's just part of this reality and this experience.
Mhm. So I
So
guess out
yeah,
of curiosity, for dealing with somebody who I guess is like good at like I guess like rinse and repeating on people, like do you have any advice on how to deal with people like that? Because it's like that's kind of a weird concept to think about, like somebody who just like
somebody says they're the best at getting the most out of people for the least.
yeah, because
Yeah, it is. It's a trip to me, right? But it was. I think it's just part of our evolution. First off, all these people are within ourselves. The world's always showing us an aspect of ourself that we need to address within ourselves to move on to the next higher, right? And so it's always showing us what's still within us. And then as I've seen these versions, I'm like, ooh, I don't want to be that. But a lot of these versions are tough because they come with shiny objects, and they know how to you know how to manipulate yourself is really right what this perfect reflection's doing. So more importantly, I mean, I love a saying, no victims, only volunteers, right? Because at the end of the day, people talk about, oh, I'm in this relationship and he does this and he cheats on me, but they stay there.
yeah,
They're
that's true.
volunteering. They're choosing to stay. They're not leaving. And I feel most humans, and I've absolutely come from this. I've been on the narcissistic side in my first marriage where I was horrible. I'm not proud of it. I was ridiculously bad. And my wife probably should have left me and then split in the beginning, and she didn't, but she should have. Um, but it's like, there's a certain point in certain energies, lower vibrations, where when you're stuck in it, it's like the comfort or the non, like your fear of change is way more powerful than your toxic environment.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
We'll stay somewhere because I don't know, we're scared to make a bold decision and never look back, right? I mean, how many, it never made sense to me, and me and my wife said this, I think, a few times, but I don't remember if we did for sure. But I know I've heard other people that you're watching their relationship and it's so chaotic and so unhealthy. Well, we're going to stay together for the kids.
Mhm. You're like your kids do not want to be around that. That's just a lot of
Yeah,
time, like it's like
and I remember hearing that a lot in my life, where people would say, "Oh, we're staying, it's for the kids," and it's like, no, it's so not for the kids. Like it's
no,
like
it's functional. Please stop.
like if it was for the kids, you guys would split up and show, and then do it in a peaceful way where you did it as friends and just sort of like, hey, we don't get along, no hard feelings.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's show the kids how we take the high road. Let's show them how to be good people. But the same people that say it's for the kids go through divorce and fucking battle each other and fight each other and want to ruin each other, and they'll pay more money to the lawyers to screw each other, where at the end nobody gets anything but the lawyers. And trust me, I've been in that vibration many years of my life, and it made so much sense then, because ego and pride and I'm right and you're wrong, and I need to screw you and I need to do, and I think most of the planet resides there, from what I've seen in them. So it's strange, man. And that's why I guess when I said, freedom of of breaking fear, I mean, I think fear is what keeps a lot of people in that state of mind. Just a lot of different fears.
Mhm.
It's fear of stepping into your higher self, fear to realize that you're divine and powerful. And when you make choices and never look back for your out of self-love and self-interest, the universe provides amazing experiences in your life, in your world, that you only get when you step out of your comfort zone.
So why do you think we have this tendency to want to like go into like numbing and escaping rather than actually just doing something more positive? Like, why do you feel like we self-sabotage? Because it's so weird to think that it's like, when I look at like how chaotic my life used to be, and I'm like, why wouldn't like I look at myself at those times, I'm like, why wouldn't I just be like, want to believe that anything could be better than what it was? Because it was like so chaotic. And I'm like, anything could have been better. Like, you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And then it's a trip because, it's because when you're there, you don't know.
Mm,
I mean, that's for me when I was in my hell, because I do consider it hell. I personally believe the Bible or any of these, let's just make the hell and the heaven story or levels of consciousness, and you can experience them while you're alive.
yeah,
And even when they talk about death and renunciation and going to heaven, I believe they're talking about the human death, the ego death, and I don't know if it ever dies completely, but at least enough of it to transcend into a new vibration of beauty
mhm,
and connection and giving and love, right? Those what and to me that is heaven. I mean, sometimes even heaven has some fears in it. It's scary, but I'll tell you what, I'm blessed to see some magical, divine. I mean, I can't, you can't even describe how you get to see the world at a certain point. You can't. There's no words for it.
mhm,
But to me, it is heaven. But it still has some human in there that comes with some fears and trippy things, and now you're playing the game because you're realizing you're in this created reality that's between your emotions and your mind. And now it shows you everything you need to see in order to keep transcending. And the Bible does say, I'm not religious, but the Bible does have good things, right? The human dies hard, or we have to die daily, and there's those aspects that we had programmed into us for so long, which does seem to be a lot of fear. And until you've had that awakening, driving drunk seems really normal and seems totally okay because you're not capable of thinking about anybody else, or drinking or using all these things. I wasn't even capable. How many alcoholics and addicts think they even have a problem for most of, I mean, eventually you start to realize it, but there's a long time you think you're normal. You don't, you
mhm,
think everything's great, and you think your toxic environment at home is normal, and most of us, and that goes back to what goes around comes around. Usually we're repeating everything we saw as kids, right? We're literally repeating it. So it is normal, and you don't know it's not normal until something happens to us that you can't describe or you can't explain. And when it's time, it's time. And then you're able to look back and just be like, wow, I was sick, right? Like I
mhm,
was insane, and it's happened to me multiple times in
yeah,
sobriety, where the first one was with drugs and alcohol, right? Where you have our step, which returns us to sanity, right? And I did that, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing it, but I'm not crazy. And then a few months later, I'm like, wow, I was crazy. I had no clue. And then I've had it again happen, with realizing that my life was being run off of fear, and now my fears are coming to the surface because I'm not drinking or using, and now I'm having to face my fears. And I was creating patterns where I'm like, damn, I'm pretty much kind of insane again because I keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I'm not picking up drugs and alcohol anymore,
mhm,
but I still have an old program that's controlling me and making me do things because it, and you don't know you have them until you finally are able to see them, and it's really trippy. It's very humbling. It's very, I don't want to say it's embarrassing because that would be, Randy 8 years ago. But it's humbling. It's like, wow, I have to admit this about myself in order to transcend it. And it seems to take years with some of these.
absolutely. I don't know. Yeah, the whole thing, it's weird to think about. It- It's also weird to think about like how easy it is to get back into those cycles. Like it just seems like as soon as something like gets taken out and I'm like, okay, great, like everything's good. It's like a flick of the switch is all it takes to put to go back into those patterns of chaos if I want to. It's a choice. It's like once I'm out of it, I realize how much of a choice it is to be able to go back into it. Um,
Yeah, but when you're in it, it isn't a choice, honestly.
no, no, when you're in it, it's not. Once you're out of it, though, you can see that
Yeah.
it's a choice to get back into it if you want to, though.
But is it? And this is where I like to kind of not argue, but philosophize, right? Because when
Okay, let's go for it. Let's see.
when you're in these patterns, they're not choices, they're reactions, they're of things you just do because that's the vibration you're at. Like I used to just pick up a drink and numb myself because that's what that vibration, that suffering I had inside, that's the only thing that made it better, which to some might be appear as a choice, but to me it was more of no, it's a reaction. I just drink because I had to get through. You
But
know what I mean?
so where would you say the separation is? Is it like, for me, I find that the separation for me, the separation was once I recognized that it was a pattern, that's when I knew that it was a choice for myself.
But if it's a pattern, I'm just throwing it. Once you recognize the pattern and you see what was keeping you in the last one, is it a choice? Because now you see it so clearly, you realize you can't do it anymore.
But then I still knew it was a choice, because then I could see that I could do something different. And if I'm not doing something different, then I knew that it was
Yeah.
a choice, because I was choosing to choose the pattern.
Yeah, but and that, like I said, it's fun to laugh about because I honestly don't feel like I'm really making the choice. I think I'm a byproduct of something that's happening at that vibration that just plays itself out, you know. And the humans like to think it looks like a choice, and maybe it is, but like I
But
said, to me, it's
the
like a cause and effect, right? And so the cause was fear, the effect was drinking, right? And then when I finally realized, say, and then when I realized the cause, then the effect goes away.
Mhm.
So they're kind of the same thing. So is it a choice or is it just a thing that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Needed itself to experience itself, you know? And so when I do see a pattern and I'm like, oh, I finally am suffering enough to see the pattern because I'm freaking hitting another rock bottom. And now it's like, ooh, I can't do that anymore. I don't think it's a choice. I don't think I could actually, that program's done. It's played itself out. It's time for the new program. And then now I become part of the new program, which isn't a choice because that last one was so bad that I got to change. It's a forced change, you know. And then I go into that one, and then I become okay. Now I'm in this one for a while, and I've switched a couple. I've went through a few of these, and each time I go through it, I say the same thing. I'm like, man, I had no idea what I was doing, and I can't do it anymore. It just doesn't work. I have to change, you know. And there's no way I can go back.
So then, how much choice do you feel like we have, or do you feel like we have no choice at all?
I feel like we have very, very little. You know, I really feel like we're just. I mean, if you believe a lot of these spiritual people, right? They say, "Oh, we all signed up for this before we got here. We all signed up for our story. We already wrote it, and now we're here to experience it." And I tend to believe more of that. You know, and I'm talking with everything, right? It's like, you know, why is it that at this point, like I just drink water pretty much all the time, and that's all I like. I mean, everything else is water's what tastes amazing to me. You know, that's all I need. I mean, I'll drink. You know what I'm saying? It's interesting because before I felt like I had all these choices, or Coke or tea or this or that, and when I pick up, and I will occasionally, and I had a Coke on the airplane because I wanted a Coke, but as you have one, you're like, oh my gosh, I could see how addicting this, you know, like you're very sensitive to everything that is normal to most people, and then once you break that cycle, you can do it, and you're like, wow, so maybe we do have a little bit of choice on small things. I think maybe on little things we have a little bit of choice, but I think in our bigger pictures of life, our bigger story, I think it's pretty set. Um, so maybe some small little choices on day to day, but same thing. It's like, why does somebody crave a steak? Is it that you're craving a steak, or does your body need iron and it's telling you to eat meat? You know, like, is there something within it? Our system always knows what it needs, and it's telling us what it needs, and we think we're making a choice, but in reality, we're just listening somewhere in a spot so deep that we're not aware that it's always telling us what to do, right? Like when we're thirsty, why are we thirsty? Why do we choose to drink water? Well, our body needs to hydrate, you know, and
Do you think, like, so then, would surrender moments and all those kinds of things, do you think those are already like pre-baked into our stories, so that we have no choice in those?
well, I think that's what surrender is, right? And letting go is to trust that there's a beautiful plan and something that's meant for us. And when we let it go, things come in that I can never predict or control or try to do, or or realize that, I'll work on a plan for a while that I want to do and it just doesn't go, but something else develops that I never tried. Right. And I'm like, oh, that's really neat. I didn't even think of that, but yet here it is kind of growing itself in my life, or, or the right things show up, or when I quit seeking things, the things necessary come. It's like there's something that knows that me way better than me, and if I trust it, it's going to take care of me. And a lot of people call it God. I resonate with the universe, but I also think it's more, electromagnetic, and law of attraction. We attract what we need all the time with where we are energetically, and how that appears in the material world is always really interesting to watch.
So then, okay, so in this, we're mostly focusing, I guess, on the physical aspects of things showing up. So do you think that we can control our thoughts? Do you think that those are predetermined, that we have to experience these emotions, that we have to experience how these feelings are, these temptations? Do we have the ability to control how we react to them, think about them, or do you think everything is predetermined by?
No, I don't know. I think we have to go through a process of feeling emotions and feeling it to healing it. And right, we have a human experience. We have a nervous system, and with as much as it'd be nice to not have to deal with it, we do. But I've also learned that things that my triggers that used to be my triggers, that things that used to bother me, once I'm aware of a trigger or something bothered me, and I let it go, then that thing no longer shows. Once I get rid of the trigger within me, nothing, that outer thing I can't be triggered when I don't have a trigger.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
So yeah, I had to go through a lot of triggers and a lot of things that were in me to, get rid of. And once you get rid of them, then you no longer, things that everything used to bother me. Everything used to bug me. Everything was, that pity party, why me? And then, what, even just, you name it, like traffic, this, that, everything. Now, honestly, very, very few things bother me. Nothing really bothers me, because it's when you break free of that illusion that you're creating, and you become that peace inside you, the world reflects back that peace outside of you. And it's pretty cool, and you're like, wow, this is literally showing me. And you realize nothing needs to bother you unless you want to bother yourself.
I guess I like to bother myself then.
Most of us do. And don't get me wrong, I still do too. I'm working on things that right now in my life that are deeper, and I'm like, ooh, there is some deep ones I'm facing right now that I admit are like, geez, man, this is a good one. This is bothering me. And why should it be bothering me? Because I know all these things, but what is it within me I need to address to do this? And I think that what goes around comes around is huge, because the things that bothering me are usually me.
Mm-hmm. So then where do we go from here? Okay, so we get love, compassion, all this thing is the goals for things. But then what do we do with that? Where do we go with that? I guess why I ask those things, because I look at my life and I'm trying to do something with my life, but every time I try and go somewhere, the business starts falling apart, the job opportunities aren't there. I can't seem to do anything. Nothing seems to work. Nothing. I'm trying to get anything going, but there's nothing doing anything. So it gets very frustrating. So
Yeah,
what's the point? What can you do with it?
I think this is where, when things, for me personally, because I hear you, but this is kind of what I'm saying when I say the big things are almost predetermined, because I'll work on things and I have these plans and these ideas, and they just nothing works about them a lot. And I'm like, why? I don't get it. I'm trying, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and when I'm going through those times, it's usually when I tend to need to be more of service, or I tend to, need to get out of self, and then usually what happens is a lot of things come into my world for me to be of service to others, right? To be there to help, and as I'm being there to help with these other things, it takes my mind off of these things that aren't working, and a lot of times it's definitely not Randy's way. I would have my life if I had a complete say in everything right now. Trust me, my life, I would not be. I'm just being honest. I would not be where I'm at, and I would not be doing this. But apparently, there's this plan that has me doing things that right now I'm doing, and I'm doing them gratefully and graciously, and I see why a lot of them I'm doing, but I would be having these other things that I want to be doing right now happening and folding, and I've been trying them, and I've been calling or doing this, and it falls up and like it just won't develop, and you know it's a trip. I definitely don't know much anymore.
So why do you think that I guess some people find their callings earlier in life than others?
Great question. I think like it gets back to everything has to happen right? Every experience is happening, and some people, or why are some people able to get married at 18 and be happily married their whole lives, and the vast majority of people can't, but some can. Why is it that I thought I did find my purpose and passion? I loved growing cannabis. It was my passion. I loved it. I was amazing at it. Got like I've said, I got the first cultivation license in a municipality in the history of California, like big things. And then why does that experience of me getting that then it really lead to me getting sober? Like
Yeah.
and not that I have a problem with cannabis anymore, because I've shared, I do believe sobriety, to thine own self be true. I mean, I don't need cannabis, I don't use it, but what I'm saying is if people are going to consider themselves sober and take it, look, and this is none of my business, I'm not judging anybody, so my point is, personally, I look at plants as healthier than pharmaceuticals. That's just me. I don't really need them, but if a lot of people still feel like they do, why do you get my point? But why did that be such a huge part of my life, and why do I feel so lost right now, and I'm trying to find myself again, and what am I going to do, and keep taking my steps every day of life, to develop some ideas that I'm working on, that they're developing, but is that really what I want to do forever? I'll tell you, for me personally, I'm actually having a hard time right now, because I want to know what I'm working. I really am excited. I want to be working on something, that I know I'm going to be working on, because I just enjoy being really good at things. I like to, I don't know, I enjoy really mastering things, and I'm not sure what I want to master next.
Oh, I feel that in my soul. Yeah. Like I want to feel like I'm doing good at something, and like I want to see like the results. I'm very like results driven. So I
Yeah,
feel
you know what I mean? And so why do some people find it? Do some people never find it? Does everybody find it? I'm not exactly sure. But it does seem like most of the people who go through really big spiritual awakenings or get sober have huge life changes, where they think they're here for one thing, and then it completely changes and they're here for another. So what is really that purpose? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's individual, right? It's interesting.
I guess that's what adds to the mystery.
Yeah, right. The total mystery, because, and it's like, who knows? Are they even real? Like, right? Because in the oneness, everybody in our awareness is all the same thing, experiencing itself. And then we've talked about this, the rest are just NPCs. They're just here to fill the spaces in the simulation, right? So, is it any, it gets so strange. Let's just say sobriety gets super, super strange, you know? And,
So, okay. So then I guess like bringing it back to our topic then, like what goes around comes around. So it's like when I go and think of like my neighbor who's now like elderly and like needs help and things like that. And like I just think about like how she used to have like all these like hopes and dreams and like, and seeing how like she's slowed down so much now, At what point do like it just like it makes me slow down and think, I'm like, okay, well, I have all these like hopes, dreams, and ambitions. At what point do I have to slow down, or at what point should I start like taking some time to stop and reflect? Is that something that, because she's showing up in my awareness, am I supposed to be perhaps like slowing down and like taking some time to stop and reflect? Because I feel like maybe that's kind of what is showing up, because she obviously showed up for a reason. I don't think that would have been.
yeah, no, I agree. I think everything shows up in our reality for a reason. Yeah, hey, I've just tried to take notes in what I've observed in my life. And I have also, when we're talking about this, I've also seen some really older people that have never gotten to that young. They stay, I think the more you give, this is just an observation. I think the more you keep contributing to the system, bringing positivity to it, helping it evolve, grow, that you keep as you're staying in that flow of energy, which goes into give and you shall receive, right? Or even what goes around comes around, right? When you're giving love into the system, love comes back. And I think that's what keeps us alive, and I've seen a lot of people that when they quit kind of having some type of purpose, or they retire, or they're just older, but they're just living, but you know what I mean? But they're not participating.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That seem to start to, like I said, they seem to start to go back to the childlike. They seem to start aging. I think they, maybe it's interesting as we're talking about it, and it's making more sense to me as it's coming out of my mouth, as maybe that's how we break samsara, right? Everyone says we're stuck in samsara, the wheel of illusion, and right. And so when what goes around comes around, obviously maybe, needs to be transcended, right? And then when you get into that giving state your whole life till the very end, maybe you actually break that cycle and you don't get young. You know what I mean? Because I've definitely seen some older people that are not young. I mean, they're not children at the end. They're adults. They're mature, right? And it's like maybe they've broken free of that, having to come back to this planet because they've served a purpose. They've brought something here their whole life, and to the end, they've kept evolving. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe their ability to keep evolving and growing to the end is what sets them free at the end. And maybe they don't have to completely go back through that, that repeating the childlike stage, because I don't know, it's interesting to watch. It's very interesting to see how all this stuff works.
Mm-hmm. So avoid isolation and connect more is.
I think so. I think that's huge. I do. I believe the isolation is, I mean, I believe isolation is, where does it come from? Because, right, if we're isolating in the material world, something internally in us is happening, right? I think the isolation is, you're disconnected. I believe the energy likes to be in groups, right? It likes to commune. It likes to be in environments of more energy, and the more you're in that environment, whether it's even church for some people, whether it's 12-step programs, I don't care. But yeah, being in some community where you're still participating, I think is really important,
So we're a giant fungus in a video game.
Yeah, basically. Well, I mean, if you ever looked at pictures of mycelium, have you ever, what mycelium is?
What, the mushrooms? Like
Well, fungus.
Okay.
So mushrooms grow out of mycelium, and then our largest living organism, I think, on the planet, or at least might be the planet, but is in Oregon. There's a patch of mycelium that's like huge. It's like hundreds of miles. I think search it. It's a mycelium patch in Oregon that's living, and it's alive, and it's giant. And then if you look at our brain,
Mm-hmm.
in our neural network, and then you look at the universe, they're all the same thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the as above, so below, right? So you look at mycelium, you look at our brain and neural network, and you look at a picture of the universe, and they're literally identical, right?
Oh,
And yeah, I believe that's how, everything's connected. Everything needs it, but it's really one big system that appears to be a lot of small pieces, but it's really just one large living thing that, when you stay connected, and you stay in a symbiotic community, things thrive.
oh, okay. You're back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. My internet went out, so I connected to my phone. Anyway, did you look up that mycelium patch?
Yeah. Oh no, that's super cool.
Yeah. So, I think the whole as above, and that's our soil, right? Our soil food web, everything has really the same thing, right? And wow. Okay, I don't know why I keep losing. It keeps cutting out. But anyway, everything works off that same system, right? An interconnected web of, I guess, energy, right? And even on planet Earth, right? We look at humans as we are like the mycelium network of the planet, right? We really are. It's just and generally when you have a symbiotic mycelium network, anything parasitic is actually usually can't survive in a symbiotic environment. The symbiosis usually keeps anything from being parasitic able to thrive, right? So symbiosis seems to keep things alive. Unfortunately, it appears most of this planet is more in parasitic mode right now. It's more of, mine, take, steal, cheat, instead of cooperate, give, um, you know, help, right? And
Yeah.
so it's all the same thing, really. It's a bummer. It's a trip to watch, man. That's for sure.
We're being part of the change that we want to see.
Right, exactly. Right. So just become the change you want to see, and remember it's all an inside job, right? And things do have to follow. I personally feel as we go into this age of Aquarius, that that's what's happening. We're going into a sustainable age, and all these old systems that have been in place on this planet for a long time, especially in our last cycle we're in, the more material age. I mean, look at that last few hundred years, the materialism, and the what's the basically all the building and the material and all the computer, everything's just it was a material age. We're going into a spiritual age, and so all those things that were based that weren't sustainable are all going away, and that's going to take a lot of the world to look like it's falling apart. But like everything, they're just cycles, and things have to fall apart to fall together. And people hate change, and when change happens, it doesn't look fun. But in the long run, it's exactly what needs to create what needs to be sustainable. And so I don't know. It's one big cosmic motion picture show anyway. So just enjoy it. Just enjoy. It's just cycles. We're just observers of them. So
Yeah. It's going to feel terrible while you're in it, but it always, hopefully
well,
it's going to be better once you're in the other side.
I mean, it doesn't have to feel terrible. When you realize it's the illusion, the dream, that's trying to bring you back into it, and remember that the outer world is not real. With as much as it wants to be. That you don't have to suffer. You can just eat some popcorn and enjoy the show.
Yeah, I have to get better at that. I still tend to flail around it.
Yeah, we all do. I don't know. I'll tell you what. I have no problem with what's happening in the world in general. I don't believe in whatever. But my personal reality is where, But I'll tell you, it's all the same, right? It's funny because you look at all this deep cleansing and shadow work, and I don't care what look you put on the government, whether it's Trump, right now, what are they doing? They're going through and doing a bunch of cleansing and deep shadow work in the gut, right? It's all shadow work at all levels right now, and things are coming to the surface, whether it's, whatever, the government doing it with the doji or somebody doing their steps. It's all literally happening the same time simultaneously, and then on a bigger level of the world, even COVID, it's like, look what COVID really did. I mean, look at how many things came to the surface that if COVID didn't happen, like just all the dark that came to the surface, the Fauci's or the the Pfizer's, and just all the things that really showed us how our system is so much about control and money, and how they and fear, right? Like let's scare the crap out of everybody, and but I do believe that's a deeper spiritual unfoldment as well, right? It's all the world kind of showing itself on all levels to make people realize maybe they're not quite as free as they thought they were.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
you know.
I don't know.
So
I guess that's a topic for another day.
it all
Because
goes
we get
back,
going
right?
forever on that one. Just like, yeah,
Yeah.
world fear,
Well,
like that's
but
an interesting
it
one.
is the what goes around comes around, right? Because literally now we're seeing as we're going into a spiritual age from a material age. I mean, that's one giant cycle. If you look at the Vedanic calendars or the Mayan calendars, what it all it's a wheel of time, man. It's just a cycle. Things just spin. And as humans, we really aren't here very long. And a lot of these cycles take hundreds of years to change. And it's still what goes around comes around, though. It all is the same thing.
That's so cool.
It's super cool. It's super cool. I actually want to study the Mayan calendars and the Hindu Vedanic calendars a lot more. And I did for a while. I studied into, the cycles of time, the 144,000 years, the 12,600, the 24, I shouldn't talk about them because I really forget kind of, but there are these giant cycles that just spin,
Oh, that's so cool.
you know?
Yeah, I would love to learn about those. That'd be so sick.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to hear those.
Yeah. I mean, history repeats itself, right? So anyway, and then you have it on a small scale of alcoholism and addiction within a family. Same thing. What comes around, right? It's interesting. So
It's good.
anyway, talk about a lot of interesting things, but that's probably good for today. I think we went pretty wildly deep out there anyway. So
Yeah, we're coming up on I think just on the hour mark, and your internet is sketching me out. So I'm like, oh
right.
no. So
All right.
you keep freezing. I'm like, no, we not lose our episode.
Yeah, no, we'll probably skip in and out a bit, but we should have it. It's still recording right now. I believe it's still recording anyway. I think
Oh,
it says recording. Yeah, we're recording. All right. Well, Victoria, another beautiful day. I appreciate you
absolutely.
kind of choosing this topic of what goes around comes around and watching the cycles of life and cycles of everything. And it was fun chatting with you like always. And until next week.
Sounds good. Bye, friends.
All right. Bye, friends.